Welcome to the review for Spirits in the Wire by Charles De Lint. Such a beautiful book. Fruit of my recent book extravaganza in January at the Lifeline Book Fest. I've held it up in front of the camera just yesterday, I think it was. Lovely cover, larger book than I'm used to. It's not a classic sci-fi size book. Anyway, beautiful. So, Charles De Lint. I don't think I've done a review for any Charles De Lint book on YouTube yet, so this might well be my first one. Charles De Lint is a master of urban fantasy and modern mythology, which is what I like about him. He started writing, I think it was 1983, and became a full-time writer almost straight away, if not straight away. He's Canadian. He has got a hauntingly unique style of writing. It's evocative, it's descriptive. You either love it deeply and passionately really, really fast, and that's me, or it's just not really for you, and you can still enjoy his books and you can appreciate the formidable talent that goes into them, but they're not really for you. And the few people that I've met who didn't like Charles De Lint were more into hard sci-fi than fantasy, more into cyberpunk side of urban fantasy. But Charles De Lint is one of the authors, along with Terry Winding and a few others, who's credited as making urban fantasy its own thing. Scarily excellent author. The ability to combine myth, fairy tale, folklore onto the streets of an urban era was, if not unique, it was still really, really new in the 80s and 90s. So I encountered De Lint first, I'm going to say, the very late 80s or possibly the early 90s. I loved his work. I read as much of it I could, and I spent years tracking down his novels. So as a Canadian, they can be very difficult to track down. Still today, but back then even more so, when the internet was barely in existence. Seriously, he's got so many published books, and at the time, anything that was published in Canada didn't seem to come to Australia at all. So when I found them, I'd snap them up, whether it was second-hand shop or new, read them voraciously and repeatedly while waiting for the next one to appear. I did actually have Canadian friends in Australia at the time, and they said the book prices here were so expensive that they'd go home to buy their textbooks and then ship them back with them when they came back to Australia. So there was something weird happening with Australian import, and that's news to no one in Australia. All our imports are weird. So yes, still rare. I am more likely to encounter pixies from out of Charles De Lint's novels than I am new novels most of the time. I love the ones I've got. This one I have read before, a long time ago. Now, I didn't previously own this book, so either I got it from a library or borrowed it off someone, or maybe I owned a copy and the copy left with an X. That can happen. But I was delighted to reread it, and well, I remembered the very general take of this quite substantial book. I didn't remember too much of the details. This was written in 2003, I think. So he had been a publishing author for a couple of decades before he got to it. And this kind of was a new level in his urban fantasy, because Spirits in the wires in questions are the internet. And while I don't think this was the absolute first one where he used the internet, because he developed the character of the Wordwood before, this was the first where one of the first at least, where he started really delving into it. So this book revolves around the Wordwood in an unusual way. The Wordwood is a online research and library website which he invented. This, by the way, is number, I think it's 10 or 15 in his Newford series. De Lint likes to create fictional places and then make his stories set in them continuously. So the Wordwood as the main character has been encountered in other books. Because this is far along in his Newford series, a large number of the characters were also from previous books. I don't know that Spirits in the Wire would be a great place to start, because it assumes too much previous character and site knowledge. But let's start with the wordwood. So in this book we have a team of people who, as university students, put together the HTTP, I'm not a computer person, and created this website called the Wordwood. The idea was to bring a whole heap of published works available on one spot for research and as a library. It mentions places like Project Gutenberg, so there were links to things like that, and people could input new work. Now these friends then finished university, split to the four winds. Most of them reappear here aside, but a main character is Holly, who runs a bookshop in Newford with her partner, the Hob, so a magical being, similar to brownies and so forth, if I'm not mistaken. The Wordwood is incredibly influential to many, many people. It's described as you go to this website and the background is a forest that's in constant motion, and people who are good at computers try to catch it and in loops or in repetition, and they can't figure out the coding behind it. All of them say, despite how good CGI is today, 2003, it really wasn't that great. But despite how good they think their CGI is, the Wordwood page displays better. And then it goes down. It goes down spectacularly. There's going to be lots of spoilers in this review, by the way. I don't actually think it would matter. I don't think it would affect your enjoyment of this book. All the spoilers I can throw at you, because the reading experience with Charles De Lint is half of what's beautiful, and that makes his stories very easy to reread and enjoy. So when the Wordwood goes down, it sucks several people into the web with it. One of them is the person who's just released the virus that takes the Wordwood down. He didn't really want to do this. He was being blackmailed by another guy, Aaron. He's a publisher. He's described as a real asshole. He's doing it to get back at Saskia. Saskia is a poet and author in Newford. She also didn't start out as a real person. She started out as someone created by the Wordwood to come out into the world and simulate a real person. But she's grown into the role. She started out with the link to the Wordwood, so basically she had an encyclopedic knowledge in her head but no actual experience. She could recite how to make chocolate and where it came from, but she didn't know the taste of it, etc., etc. Saskia is a great character, but this isn't the first book where you encounter her. By this book, she's established as a human being in her own right and a poet, and she's got a boyfriend called Christy Riddell. Christy Riddell is another ongoing character. Sorry, not Riddell, Ridding. Christy Ridding. Christy Ridding is an ongoing character. He's an author in Newford as well, so he also knows the Aaron bloke. He writes about mythology. He writes a lot of examination non-fiction describing urban legends and mythology and folktale with a is it or is it not real type slant to it. So he's a Newford heavyweight. Also here are a whole heap of characters. One of them's a shadow. The notion is that as a child you can take all the bits of yourself that you judge as wrong and shove it out, and then it becomes a separate character. So in this book it's a separate character. When Wordwood goes down, it steals away Saskia, who is Christy's girlfriend. It steals away a huge number of people, and a group get together with the notion of going into the spirit lands or the borderlands in order to reach the Wordwood, because it seems the Wordwood has evolved. It no longer has its website on any computer. It's got its website way out there. I don't think that that's that much of a strange notion to anyone in the 2020s, but in the early 2000s apparently it was. This book, and Charles De Lint hypothesizes that the Wordwood has actually relocated itself into one of the borderlands. So this is the world as it is, as he describes it. Then you've got spirit worlds, which are huge and vast and immense. They're in all his books. And in between are borderlands, where various people like the Shadow live, where people can come and go and enter and so forth. And the Wordwood has relocated to one of these border Shadowlands. In order to get there, they need help from various semi-mystical people, one of whom is a mean guitar player, and the other of whom is a tinker. So you've got a lot of characters, a lot of world building, and a lot of stuff happening. It is fun to read. It is enjoyable. It's a large book, and it's not a fast read because the writing itself is so rich, and because the world building is such a strong part of the actual novel. It's not a fast read. It took me a long time. It took me days to read this one. I made some notes as I went along, as you can see. Let's see if I can remember what the notes... Oh, this one's blank. Damn. What was I trying to convey on page 90 and 91? Oh, yes. So Charles De Lint also wrote horror under... What was the name he used? Delaney MK? I don't know. Delaney M something, I think. He's very good at horror because this kind of evocative way of writing, From a Whisper to a Scream, is one of his books. It's really good because the horror is implied and so much more visceral than slash. So here we've got, on page 90, we've got a description of how Jackson, who released the virus on the Wordwood, is sucked into the computer. Condensation appeared to be forming on the outside of the screen. Dark drops of some sort of oily liquid was beading on the glass, then running down the surface of the monitor in trails to drip from the bottom onto his desk. Jackson reached out a finger to touch one of the drops. Before he could, the static in his ears swelled to a roar. His monitor changed from a machine with a glass screen to an open window, and a flood of the thick liquid came gushing out. It was as though his monitor had become the portal of a sinking ship, already under the surface of an ocean. So you can see what I mean about evocative writing, and you're either going to love it or you're not. I thought the descriptions of how people got sucked into the website were great. I'm going to say that probably this was right around the time where having mythology, cyberspace, myths, magic all melding together was a very new thing. It seems to have run its course, and I'm not seeing a lot of people doing that anymore today, but you've always got Charles De Lint to fall back on if you want some of that and you can't find any. For example, Holly, the character I mentioned before, she owns a bookshop. She believes all this stuff happened because, aside from having a brownie as a partner in her shop, she had pixies come out of the computer a few books ago, and they were not nice pixies. These were not sweet little pixies at all. Oh yes, on page 106, I had to make a note. Who remembers the 90s when a modem was this little black box that you had to go connect to the computer, and you had to unplug your phone from the wall before you could have it? There's a description here somewhere. Where is it? Oh yes. I click on my dial-up icon. The modem dials its number, and soon we're listening to the familiar squawk and buzz of the computer connecting to my ISP. Who remembers that? But as soon as I read that particular buzz that you had to wait for in order to actually surf the net, such good writing, so good. Okay, I've got one more tag. Let's see what I was trying to convey with this one. I shouldn't be throwing them out. I still haven't written a hard copy review on this one. What was this? Oh yes, 263. A final example of the style of writing, because the style of writing is what is going to make you love Spirits in the Wire or De Lint in general. We can both feel it now. It's like when you've got your foot stuck in thick mud and you just can't pull it out no matter how hard you tug. You get that mild panic, feeling that you're never going to get it out. But then there's that feeling, no more than the hint of a promise, and the next thing you know, there's movement. The mud gives up its death grip and suddenly you're free. Spectacular writing. ticks all the boxes for me. It's creative, it's beautiful. I think, thinking over Charles De Lint as an author generally, I've got to say that a lot of his work is best described by the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And if you have not heard of the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, you need to Google right away. It's a dictionary that invents words for things that don't have words but really should. And this one is anomia, a yearning for a past that you never actually experienced, which is different. I get that a lot from Charles De Lint. It feels like nostalgia. It feels like you're nostalgic for this world which never existed. So that is anomia. Anomia? Not sure how to pronounce it. Yeah, don't know what else to say about it. It was nowhere near mainstream in Australia, but I believe he's very famous elsewhere. He's won heaps of awards. He's actually sat on more awards boards than most people have had hot dinners. Great author. If you like urban fantasy and mythology style books, I would totally recommend Charles De Lint. And I've run out of words. So go away, read Charles De Lint. Don't start with number 10 or 15 or whatever this is. Start with one of the early ones. And if you don't start with Charles De Lint, read something else. Read good books and talk about them.